which is an architectural salvage yard run by a guy called John. I've never been to their salvage yard, never been.
For years, fans watched Drew Pritchard travel across the UK, uncovering forgotten treasures and turning rust into gold on his hit show Salvage Hunters. He was charming, confident, and full of passion, the man who could spot beauty in the broken. But behind the cameras, Drew's own life was slowly falling apart. The antiques expert who spent years restoring the past would soon find himself struggling to rebuild his own future. Born and raised in the small town of Conwy, Drew worked his way up from scrap yards and junk shops to become one of the most respected names in the business. His unique eye for design made him a star, and his television fame brought him success most could only dream of. But as fame and fortune grew, so did the pressures, and Drew's world began to change in ways he never expected. His marriage to co-star Rebecca Pritchard came to an end. The pair, once partners in work and life, went their separate ways. Then came the next blow, the closure of his beloved antique shop in Conwy, the place where his career had begun. For Drew, it wasn't just a business, it was his identity. And just when fans thought things couldn't get harder, Drew took on his biggest challenge yet, the restoration of a centuries-old townhouse in Bath. What was meant to be a dream project quickly turned into a nightmare of financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and painful loss. He was forced to sell off his most treasured possessions just to stay afloat. From success to heartbreak, Drew Pritchard's journey is a story of ambition, loss, and resilience, a reminder that even those who make a living restoring the past aren't always able to fix what's breaking in their own lives. Long before he became the face of Salvage Hunters, Drew Pritchard was just a young boy from Conwy, North Wales, with a fascination for old things, the kind most people would throw away. While other kids were spending their weekends playing football or video games, Drew could be found in scrapyards, sheds, and junk piles, looking for anything that told a story. Old signs, discarded furniture, rusty car parts. To him, it was all treasure. That childhood curiosity would one day define his life. By his teens, Drew had already developed a sharp eye for design and history. He loved the challenge of seeing beauty in forgotten objects, of imagining what something could be rather than what it currently was. This unique vision became the foundation of his career. In 1995, he took his biggest leap yet, purchasing and restoring an abandoned Methodist chapel in Conwy. It became his home, his workshop, and the heart of his growing antiques business. Surrounded by relics of the past, Drew built his empire piece by piece, collecting, restoring, and reselling items that carried the magic of history. Every object he found had a story, and Drew became a storyteller through his craft. Then came 2011, the year everything changed. Discovery Channel approached him with an idea, to document his life as an antique dealer. The result was Salvage Hunters, a show that would make Drew Pritchard a household name. Week after week, viewers watched him scour old estates, factories, and barns, transforming dusty relics into valuable masterpieces. His charisma, humor, and passion made him instantly likable. The show's success skyrocketed. What began as a niche documentary became one of the UK's most beloved reality series, running for over a decade and spawning spin-offs like Salvage Hunters, The Restorers. Drew wasn't just selling antiques anymore. He was selling stories, nostalgia, and a piece of history. With fame came fortune. Drew expanded his team, opened a renowned shop on Conwy's High Street, and became a go-to expert in architectural salvage. His life looked picture-perfect. A thriving business, a popular television career, and a marriage to his longtime partner, Rebecca Pritchard, who often appeared alongside him on the show. Together they made the perfect team. She handled research and valuations, while he handled the deals and the drama. But beneath the charm and laughter of television, the reality of success was more complicated. Drew's perfectionism, relentless work ethic, and constant travel began to take their toll. The business of chasing beauty and broken things came with its own kind of pressure. Long days, unpredictable markets, and the growing weight of public attention. Still, Drew pushed forward, determined to keep building. His love for craftsmanship and authenticity set him apart in a world where trends came and went. He didn't just sell antiques, he preserved pieces of history. He often said, "Everything I buy has a story, and everything I sell deserves to be loved again." By the late 2010s, Drew had achieved everything he'd once dreamed of. But in the midst of fame and success, life began to shift. Behind the polished exterior of television, the cracks were starting to form. The marriage that once seemed unbreakable was quietly falling apart. The business, though thriving, demanded more energy than ever, and the fame, once exciting, began to feel like a burden. For Drew, Salvage Hunters wasn't just a show, it was his life's work. But as the years went on, the man who spent his life restoring old things began to realize that some things, like love, peace, and balance, can't always be repaired. The boy from Conwy had turned rust into riches, but the price of success was higher than he ever imagined. He had built a world out of forgotten treasures, but soon, his own life would start to feel like one of them, worn, fragile, and in desperate need of restoration. At the height of his success, Drew Pritchard appeared to have it all: fame, fortune, and a career built on passion. Salvage Hunters was thriving, his Conwy shop had become a tourist landmark, and his partnership with Rebecca Pritchard seemed unbreakable. To millions of viewers, Drew was the confident antiques expert who turned junk into art. But behind that easy smile and sharp wit, a storm was quietly brewing. Fame, for all its glamour, has a way of magnifying everything, both the good and the bad. Drew had built his name on being meticulous, persistent, and perfection-driven. He expected the best from his team, his finds, and himself. But those same traits that made him brilliant in business began to cause strain in his personal life. The long filming schedules, endless traveling, and business pressures created an invisible wall between him and Rebecca. They had started as partners in both work and love, united by their shared passion for antiques. Together, they had restored hundreds of unique pieces, built a loyal customer base, and even created one of the most successful British shows on television. But as Salvage Hunters grew, so did the distance between them. What began as small disagreements about business decisions slowly turned into emotional exhaustion. Their marriage officially ended in 2017, though fans had already begun to sense that something wasn't right. The news hit viewers hard. The pair had seemed inseparable on screen, their chemistry effortless. But for Drew, it wasn't just a divorce. It was the loss of his closest ally. Rebecca had been more than his wife. She had been his grounding force, his creative equal, and his partner in every sense of the word. Despite the breakup, the two decided to keep working together professionally, a decision that drew both admiration and sympathy from fans. It wasn't easy. Filming side by side with someone who once shared your dreams and your home took immense strength. But Drew pushed on, determined not to let his private heartbreak affect the show or his business. Still, cracks began to show. Around the same time, Drew faced another devastating blow: the closure of his beloved antiques shop in Conwy. For years, the shop had been his pride and joy, the physical heart of his career. Tourists would travel from all over the country just to step inside and maybe meet the man himself. But in 2022, Drew made the difficult decision to shut it down. The announcement shocked fans. For Drew, it felt like losing a piece of his identity. The shop wasn't just a business. It was where his dream had started, where he'd built everything from scratch. Shutting the doors for the last time was emotional, symbolic, and deeply painful. It was as if the foundation of his world was slowly crumbling. Then came the next challenge, his ambitious restoration project in Bath. What began as an exciting new chapter quickly turned into a nightmare. The costs spiraled, deadlines slipped, and stress mounted. Drew, who had spent his life rescuing and repairing the past, suddenly found himself overwhelmed by the weight of his own present. Friends and colleagues noticed a change. The once energetic and outspoken dealer seemed more withdrawn. The pressures of fame, financial strain, and emotional loss were catching up to him. For a man who had always been in control, of deals, of negotiations, of his future, this loss of balance was devastating. Yet even in the darkest moments, Drew's resilience shone through. He continued to film, to restore, and to share his passion for antiques with the world. He once said in an interview, "You can't fix everything, but you can always start again." And that's exactly what he did. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece. The end of his marriage and the closure of his shop marked the end of an era. But for Drew, it was also a chance for renewal, a painful reminder that sometimes letting go is the only way to rediscover what truly matters. From the outside, Salvage Hunters continued to sparkle with adventure and humor. But behind the scenes, its star was fighting one of the hardest battles of his life, learning how to rebuild not just furniture or antiques, but himself. As Salvage Hunters continued to dominate the airwaves, viewers remained captivated by Drew Pritchard's magnetic charm and passion for the forgotten treasures of Britain. But by the late 2010s, Drew's private life had become a target of public speculation. The end of his marriage to Rebecca Pritchard had already drawn attention, but more challenges were on the horizon. As often happens when fame meets small-town life, rumors began to swirl about personal feuds, public altercations, and the toll of constant scrutiny. The most infamous of these came in 2017, when reports surfaced of a heated confrontation between Drew and a local resident in Conwy. The incident led to temporary legal trouble and a storm of headlines that painted Drew in a very different light from the witty, easygoing TV personality fans adored. Though details were often exaggerated in tabloids, the damage was done. The antiques dealer's reputation, once built on trust and charisma, now faced serious strain. For a man who valued integrity and professionalism, this period was nothing short of devastating. Drew, who had always tried to keep his private life out of the public eye, now found himself the subject of constant gossip. The situation forced him to retreat from the spotlight for a time, focusing on his business and his craft rather than the cameras. At the same time, the stress of running multiple ventures, from the television series to the Conwy showroom and various restoration projects, was wearing him thin. The financial and emotional weight of maintaining perfection was overwhelming. Those close to him noticed how much he had changed. He was quieter, more guarded, and less willing to trust. But perhaps the hardest blow came when Drew decided to close his beloved Conwy antique store for good. Though the official explanation was that he wanted to focus on new opportunities, insiders knew it symbolized something deeper, the end of a personal chapter. The store wasn't just a workplace, it was the foundation of everything he'd built. To shut its doors felt like erasing a part of himself. For someone who'd spent his career giving old things new life, letting go was excruciating. It wasn't just about antiques, it was about identity, pride, and legacy. Drew had always said that every object has a soul, and now he was learning what it meant to lose a piece of his own. In interviews that followed, Drew spoke candidly about the emotional toll of fame. He admitted that being constantly recognized, judged, and misunderstood had made him rethink what success really meant. He described the pressure of trying to live up to the image people had of him, the confident expert who always had the perfect eye, the perfect deal, the perfect life. But as difficult as those years were, they also became a turning point. Stripped of illusion and forced to confront his failures, Drew began to rebuild quietly, not for the cameras, but for himself. He turned his focus toward private projects, smaller restorations, and mentoring younger craftsmen. His passion for saving the past remained, but now it came with a new understanding. Not everything is meant to be fixed, and sometimes it's okay to start over. Gradually, Drew's humility and authenticity began to win back the trust of fans. He appeared more grounded in later seasons of Salvage Hunters, speaking more openly about mistakes and the importance of perseverance. He became an example of resilience, proof that even when life falls apart, you can find beauty in what's left behind. The man who once chased perfection now chased peace. The fame, the fortune, the cameras, they no longer defined him. Instead, it was his love for craftsmanship, his appreciation for history, and his determination to move forward that kept him going. Drew Pritchard had experienced what so many of his salvaged treasures had endured: years of wear, neglect, and damage. But like the antiques he loved so much, he refused to be discarded. With time, patience, and hard work, he began to restore himself, not to what he once was, but to something even stronger. After years of personal turmoil, public pressure, and painful loss, Drew Pritchard found himself standing at a crossroads. The fame that once defined him had faded into something quieter, more reflective. He was no longer chasing ratings, headlines, or recognition. He was chasing something far more valuable: peace. Following the collapse of his marriage, the closing of his beloved Conway Antiques shop, and a string of controversies that had tested his resilience, Drew could have easily disappeared from the spotlight altogether. Many thought he would, but true to his nature, Drew refused to walk away from the craft that had given his life meaning. Instead, he chose to rebuild, carefully, patiently, and with a deeper sense of purpose than ever before. In interviews, Drew often compared his personal journey to the process of restoration itself. "When you strip something back," he said, "you see its scars, its damage, its history. But that's where the beauty really is. You can't erase it out, you learn to work with it." That philosophy became his new guiding principle, not just in antiques, but in life. He began focusing less on television fame and more on the essence of craftsmanship. The thrill of the deal, once his driving force, gave way to a calmer appreciation for the artistry behind every piece he restored. His projects became more selective, more personal. He poured his heart into unique restorations, working closely with artisans and collectors who shared his passion for authenticity. At the same time, Drew found a renewed sense of identity through teaching and mentorship. He started offering guidance to young restorers and designers, encouraging them to look beyond profit and instead respect the story behind every object they handled. For him, antiques were never just old things. They were pieces of human history, and the people who saved them were the caretakers of that history. His television work also began to evolve. Salvage Hunters continued, but Drew appeared more grounded than ever. The swagger and sharp humor remained, but viewers noticed a subtle change. He was softer, more reflective, and more open about his struggles. Fans who had followed his journey from the beginning saw not just a dealer, but a man who had learned the hard way what truly matters. The restoration of his Bath townhouse became symbolic of his own healing. The centuries-old property had once been a source of frustration and financial strain, but as Drew poured time and energy into bringing it back to life, it became a place of renewal. He described the process as therapy through craftsmanship. Every wall repaired, every stone cleaned, and every fixture restored felt like a small victory. Though he kept much of his personal life private after his divorce, those close to him noted a change. Drew seemed more at ease, more present, and more content with simplicity. He had rediscovered the quiet satisfaction that had drawn him to antiques in the first place, the thrill of finding something broken and making it whole again. In many ways, Drew's story mirrors the very objects he cherishes. Each one bears the marks of time, scratches, dents, faded paint. But beneath those imperfections lies something beautiful and enduring. The same could be said of Drew himself. He had been through heartbreak, humiliation, and hardship, yet he emerged not defeated, but refined. By embracing his flaws and learning from the past, Drew transformed his pain into purpose. His journey became an unspoken message to his fans that life, like restoration, is never about achieving perfection. It's about understanding that even broken things can be made beautiful again. Today, Drew Pritchard remains one of Britain's most respected antique dealers, not because of fame or fortune, but because of his authenticity. He continues to inspire through his work, his resilience, and his deep respect for history. For him, every object still tells a story, and perhaps the most powerful story of all is his own, a tale of loss, redemption, and the timeless art of finding beauty in imperfection.